When we think of snipers in World War II, most of us imagine legends, the Soviet marksmen of Stalingrad or German sharpshooters who turned battlefields into their hunting grounds. But the truth for American snipers was far different. In the United States Army of the 1940s, the sniper was not a priority. Unlike the Red Army, which built entire sniper schools, or the Wehrmacht, which elevated their marksmen to elite status, the U.S. military never fully embraced the role. To many commanders, a sniper was little more than a regular infantryman with a scope on his rifle. The mindset was simple. Why invest heavily in a single shooter when you could arm a platoon with semi-automatic rifles and machine guns? This attitude had devastating consequences. Many American snipers received only a handful of days of specialized training before being sent into combat. Imagine that. You're handed a scoped Springfield M1903, given basic lessons on camouflage, and then told to survive against some of the deadliest soldiers in the world. Soviet and German snipers trained for weeks, sometimes months, in the art of concealment, patience, and precision. An American counterpart might have had less than a week. And the equipment? It was often second-rate. The Springfield rifle was accurate, but the scopes were unreliable, fogging up in humid climates and misaligned after only a few shots. In the Pacific, the brutal jungle conditions made it nearly impossible to keep the optics clear. On the battlefields of Europe, American snipers found themselves outmatched by German sharpshooters, armed with the deadly Kar 98K, fitted with superior Zeiss optics. The lack of doctrine was another curse. U.S. infantry units rarely knew how to use snipers effectively. Sometimes they were ordered to act as scouts, other times as ordinary riflemen. There were even cases where commanders treated them as expendable bait, placing them in forward positions just to draw enemy fire. So while the myth of the sniper grew on the Eastern Front, the American sniper was overlooked, undertrained, and tragically undervalued. For many, this lack of preparation was the beginning of a short and cursed career. If Europe was a battlefield of tanks, artillery, and open terrain, the Pacific was something else entirely. For American snipers, it was a nightmare, a living hell of jungle, humidity, and an enemy that turned the environment itself into a weapon. On islands like Guadalcanal, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, every step was a gamble. The jungle swallowed men whole, concealing thousands of hiding places. And within those shadows waited Japanese snipers, disciplined, cunning, and utterly merciless. They weren't just soldiers, they were predators. Camouflaged in trees, hidden inside caves, or buried beneath foliage, they could wait for days without moving, striking with a single lethal shot. For American snipers, the mission was simple in theory, but brutal in practice. Hunt the hunters. The U.S. command quickly realized that the only way to counter Japanese snipers was to send in their own. But the reality was grim. American marksmen, already undertrained and poorly equipped, faced opponents who had mastered the art of jungle warfare. Japanese soldiers had studied concealment from childhood traditions of hunting and bushcraft, and they wove those instincts seamlessly into modern war. Every patrol was a death trap. Imagine crawling through knee-deep mud, insects swarming your face, heat pressing down like a weight. The second you raised your head, the crack of a rifle might tear through the canopy. Many American snipers never saw the enemy that killed them, and those who survived long enough to fight back often discovered the horror of the Japanese tactic: shoot once and then vanish. The jungle would fall silent again, and the fear would return tenfold. The Pacific didn't just kill with bullets, it killed with disease, exhaustion, and the relentless strain of waiting for death in every rustle of leaves. American snipers often found themselves mentally broken, their nerves shattered after weeks of cat-and-mouse games in terrain where even the trees seemed hostile. Yes, the Pacific was hell. And for American snipers, it was more than a battlefield. It was a place where skill, luck, and sanity were tested to the breaking point, and too often beyond. On the battlefield, every soldier risked death, but for the sniper, danger was multiplied. Unlike ordinary riflemen, snipers carried a reputation that made them the most despised figures on both sides of the war. To the enemy, they weren't just soldiers, they were ghosts, killers who struck from the shadows, and because of that, they became priority targets. Once an enemy sniper revealed himself, the hunt began. Entire squads were pulled away from the front just to eliminate a single marksman. Mortars were called in, artillery adjusted, even airstrikes were requested, all to silence one rifle. That was the value placed on a sniper's life. For American sharpshooters, this reality was especially harsh. In Europe, the Germans were obsessed with counter-sniping. Wehrmacht soldiers often carried special orders, capture or kill enemy snipers at all costs. If a sniper fell into German hands, mercy was rare. Stories spread through the ranks of captured marksmen tortured or executed on the spot. The Germans viewed them as dishonorable killers, not soldiers. In the Pacific, the Japanese approach was even more ruthless. They would sometimes set traps using American snipers as bait. Wounded men were left in the open, their cries drawing rescue attempts. And as comrades approached, hidden rifles finished the work. For an American sniper, the jungle meant constant pursuit. Each shot risked exposure, and once your position was discovered, survival was almost impossible. This relentless hunt created a unique kind of terror. Snipers lived with the knowledge that they were never safe. At night, in their foxholes, they were targets. During the day, while stalking the enemy, they were being stalked themselves. Every moment was a gamble, every decision a life or death calculation. And here lies the cruel paradox. The more effective a sniper became, the more he sealed his own fate. The higher the number of kills, the greater the enemy's desire for revenge. To excel was to paint a target on your back. For American snipers, this was the curse of their role. They were not only hunters, they were the hunted, above all others. If bullets and bombs didn't kill the sniper, something else often did. His own mind. Because beyond the battlefield, beyond the gunfire, snipers faced an invisible enemy, the crushing psychological weight of their work. Imagine lying in the dirt for hours, sometimes days, without moving. The sun burns your skin by day, the cold eats your bones at night. You cannot cough, you cannot scratch, you cannot even stretch your legs. One careless sound, one flicker of movement, and you are dead. This was the daily reality for American snipers. The rifle wasn't just their weapon, it was their prison. Every mission was a test of willpower. Snipers were trained to wait for the perfect shot, but waiting meant endless hours alone with their thoughts. In those long silences, fear crept in. Fear that the enemy was watching back, fear that a scope hidden in the shadows was already trained on your skull. Many described the sensation as unbearable, like living every second on the edge of execution. And then there was the act itself, pulling the trigger, killing from a distance, often watching through the scope as life left the target. For some, it was duty. For others, it was a haunting image they could never erase. Psychologists later noted that snipers carried heavier emotional scars than ordinary infantry. They saw too much, too closely. The Pacific amplified this torment. The jungle was alive with sound, insects, wind, birds, and every noise felt like an enemy. Snipers described hallucinations, hearing footsteps that weren't there, seeing movement that didn't exist. Sleep deprivation, heat exhaustion, and constant adrenaline slowly eroded their sanity. Even survival brought no peace. Returning home, many American snipers carried nightmares, guilt, and paranoia. They had lived as shadows for too long, hunted as much as hunters. And though they survived the war inside their minds never ended. The psychological torture of a sniper wasn't a side effect. It was the very core of the profession, a silent battle that consumed them from within. When we speak of World War II legends, certain names echo through history. Soviet snipers like Vasily Zaitsev, German aces like Matthias Hetzenauer, their stories were told, retold, and immortalized. But what about the Americans? Where are their names in our collective memory? The truth is tragic. Most American snipers of the Second World War were forgotten. Part of the reason lies in culture. The Soviet Union glorified its snipers as symbols of resilience. Germany hailed theirs as elite warriors. But the United States never placed its sharpshooters on such a pedestal. To American commanders, the sniper was a tool, not a hero. He was valuable in the moment, but replaceable. And when the war ended, his story was left behind in silence. This neglect carried a bitter consequence. American snipers had fought and bled just as fiercely, often under even harsher conditions. In the jungles of the Pacific, they endured a war of shadows against Japanese hunters. In Europe, they faced the precision of German sharpshooters and the cold brutality of counter-sniping warfare. Many died alone, their sacrifice known only to the small units they served with. Even those who survived rarely returned home as celebrated warriors. They slipped back into ordinary life, carrying the weight of invisible scars. While pilots, tank crews, and generals received medals and fame, the sniper's role was too controversial, too unsettling. Killing one man at a time, up close and personal, was not the kind of heroism that made headlines. And so, their names faded. Their photographs gathered dust. Their stories, if told at all, were whispered among family members, not carved into history books. The sniper's war was secretive, and so too was his remembrance. In the end, the American sniper of World War II was doubly cursed, first by the dangers of the battlefield and then by the silence of history. They fought, they suffered, they endured, and then they were forgotten. They were undervalued and poorly trained. They fought in the Pacific hell. They were hunted above all. They endured unbearable psychological torture, and when it was over, they were forgotten. This is the tragic story of the American sniper in World War II. While other nations celebrated their sharpshooters, the United States left theirs in the shadows. They entered combat without the training or resources of their enemies, yet they still fought with incredible courage. On European battlefields, they faced the relentless precision of German snipers. In the Pacific, they endured a nightmare of jungle warfare, hunted by an enemy who turned the environment into a deadly weapon. Their existence was never glamorous. They lived in silence, waiting in the mud and the dark for a single shot, and because of that, they carried scars that were invisible, but no less devastating. The war may have ended in 1945, but for many snipers, the real battle continued within their own minds, long after the guns fell silent. And then, history moved on. Their names disappeared. Their sacrifices, unlike those of aces and generals, were left unwritten. Yet without them, countless missions would have failed. Countless soldiers would never have come home. Perhaps that is the greatest injustice of all, that the very men who gave everything from the shadows remain shadows in our memory. But here, we choose to remember them, to tell their story, to give them the recognition they never received. If you want to hear more forgotten stories of World War II, the hidden battles, the unsung heroes, the cursed professions of war, then make sure you subscribe to this channel. Hit the bell so you don't miss the next video, because history is full of secrets, and together we'll uncover them all.